I think the minute I stepped on a practice field for rugby, the calling happened.
An 8-year plan to be on the team, and I was in it within 2 years.
Don't wait until you are a pro to be a pro, right?
Like, I like doing something, stopping and learning from it.
Like, it just looked like it was a heavy hit.
To give up, it's not up.
You know, that's the first time I played like professionally.
I'm making rugby money. How can I make money outside of it?
And there's two Scottish guys, and they said, "Oh, you're here for the movie."
Rugby is a sport where that's often coupled with actually having a good time.
He looked at me and he says, "You guys are off."
Grow rugby, 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 grow rugby.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of Grow Rugby. My name is GiftTime Ebelu, and this is the show where we speak with people about the opportunities that they have found, created, or taken advantage of via rugby. Hey, I gotta be honest with you. It is so cold out here today. It is freezing. We got the full freezing frost. Like, it feels like a Tim Burton movie outside in some cases, just because it's icicles everywhere, even on the blades of grass. And in Louisiana, we're not built for this, all right? We're not built for having all this coldness. So bear with me if I start to shiver a little bit during this early little monologue here. But I just have to say, I am definitely not liking it at all. I hate it. No, I hate it. I hate it. I don't know how anybody lives in this. I had a friend on a Facebook group refer to the fact that they were going to be sitting in negative 39 degrees Fahrenheit weather. I don't understand how that is. Right now it's 22 degrees, so that's negative 2 degrees Celsius. So to get to negative 39 degrees, that's what, negative 20 in Celsius, something to that effect. Like, that's insane. There's no reason for weather to get that cold. There's no reason to be that happy in it. I mean, my friend gave me a good reason, and I respect, get the monetary needs, rugby life. But still, I can't do it. So in what we're dealing with now, it sucks. But, give much consideration to the people who are in, Texas and all these places that are dealing with rolling blackouts, because at least for me, I still have electricity in my house, and I am using every bit of it for this heating. I don't know how great it's going to be for the environment overall, but, you do what you got to do, all right? You do what you got to do. But on the flip side, we have an amazing guest who is just living the opposite life that we're living. She's currently set in New Zealand. She's typically based in Dublin, but she is New Zealander. We got the general manager for all of women's rugby for World Rugby, Katie Sadleir. Just an amazing person, so charismatic, had so much fun talking with her, and I learned so much more, not just about her, but perspective and process that goes along with being able to put together something as amazing as the Rugby World Cup and putting on everything that World Rugby has been trying to get done particularly the last 5 years. And it was so refreshing. And obviously, to listen to someone who's humble but exciting, who's in touch, and is probably the highest level of rugby that we've had the opportunity of being able to talk to at this point. I definitely appreciated it. As any guest, I mean, we're talking about amazing people. Clearly, the rugby community has no bounds, in terms of personality and charisma. But just so dope to be able to speak with her and get so much. And I'm telling you, guys are going to love this. This is such a great situation when it comes to just pure opportunity right now. But I do have to say, we still had more Six Nations. I didn't get to watch the Six Nations this weekend because I didn't want to, at this moment, pay for the subscription fee for Peacock. Like I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with all my streaming services, but I got to go jump on that and get back on ESPN Plus for whenever Super Rugby starts to kick back in again. And of course, we got MLR coming up in just a few weeks. It's just a few weeks. The beginning of March is when it starts. I actually got lost in the fact that we are at the end of February. So, guys, be looking out. Probably start adding some more stuff into the podcast. So, be ready. Be ready. And to be able to continue doing these podcasts and to be able to continue bringing in great guests like this, we got to be able to continue to push, and I absolutely love the support that's been made with Rugby Outlet Mall. All right, Rugby Outlet Mall is the e-commerce store for rugby people who are trying to get into the lifestyle and society. We're here to be able to make sure that travel, that your day-to-day is full of the rugby life and is represented correctly. We're not just trying to set you up to have the typical spill blood, play rugby kind of thing. No, we want to change it up where people can recognize that you're a rugby person, but also can feel familiarity with it in all bases. We brought out some new gear. We got our Rugby Zon gear. We got our Rugby gear for Valentine's Day. Even though it's past, we still have them up and available for a few more weeks. We're going to let them probably run all the way until the end of February before starting to pull them back. Of course, we get the pleasurable HBCU Rugby Classic setup. So I can't wait to be able to show you what we have for that. And just check it out. And of course, because you guys listen to this show, you guys are going to get 20% off all GiftTime Rugby and HBCU Rugby stuff. That is including the Valentine's Day stuff. That is including all the HBCU Rugby shirts and everything moving forward. 20% off, and all you have to use is coupon code GROWRUGBY. That is GREAUX Rugby, RUGBY, all one word. 20% off. Takes off the shipping and a little bit off the cost, and I'm telling you, it's going to be worth it. The shirts are so dope. You got hoodies. We're putting out the full outfit kit. Like, we want to make sure that you rocked out all the way through, because we want to make sure you're the flyest rugby people at the social, in your office, at school, at home, doesn't matter where, because we want you to know that rugby life is more than just what you do on the field. It is that social network that connects you to the rest of the world for opportunity and adventures going through. So check it out. Grow Rugby, coupon code Grow Rugby at rugbyoutletmall.com. Check it out. And of course, always got to be able to put up for our documentary. I still stand by it. You guys need to check it out, especially when it's cold like this and you want to be able to feel the warmth and be able to also understand. This actually attacks really well with who we're speaking with. Go check out Singapore to Tokyo any way we can. It's the story of two guys, myself and my friend, as we bike rode across Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and then all the way out to Japan for the 2019 Rugby World Cup. And the adventures that we have on that, but most importantly, to be able to see just how deep the rugby culture is. $17, you get 7 episodes, 20 minutes an episode. This is like WandaVision, except for without you feeling like you have to be snuck all the way through. But you just get intrigued to see the full breadth of what is there to offer. So definitely check it out. Available for anybody in any country. Singapore to Tokyo. I guarantee, check it out. You're going to love it. There's no doubt. And you can find it at Red Earth Films, REDEARTH Films, FILMS .v as in Victor, HX .tv. Check it out. All right. Well, I don't want to hold you guys back. Get ready. The great, the legend, General Manager for Women's Rugby for World Rugby, former Olympian, swimming Olympian, former New Zealand Athletic Sports Association, Katie Sadleir. Check it out.
Grow Rugby, 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 Grow Rugby.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another amazing program of Grow Rugby. My name is GiftTime and Bailey, and we got this one is truly the VIPs of the VIPs. So, coming out from World Rugby, number one when it comes to women's rugby, former Olympian, the GM, the legend, Katie Sadleir. Katie, thank you so much for coming through.
Well, it's wonderful to be here, Gift. I have to tell you, that is an amazing introduction, I have to say. I feel like I should stand up and do a full pirouette. I'm going to take a bow before we start talking. But I'm here. I'm really looking forward to this session. It's great to talk to you and all your listeners, wherever they may reside. And I hope
the honor is all ours. The honor is all ours. So, I always like to talk where it was found. And, I learned about you. It was off of actually a couple articles. And, of course, when you get one good article, then you're like, wait, how did I not know about this person? Then you start backtracking. And then, again, you go down. And I like to always say, I don't always like to say, this is what actually almost happened. You get carpal tunnel looking at the resume just from scrolling up. Like, my fingers almost got tired and started going out because I'm like, yo, she's so accomplished. And so I was like, look, I need to talk to her. And then I actually when I was looking you up, I had friends that know you, or at least mutual friends. And, I've heard such good things. So it was like, you know what? We got to be friends. Like, I already know it's going to happen, but I was just like, we just need to make it formalized. All right. I needed her to know that we're friends now too. But,
it's great.
Yeah, I like to get started when it comes with any superhero origin story, where it always started. And you have a really, really interesting start to all this. So, as I always say, how was it that you got started in rugby?
Right. Oh my goodness. Well, it is an interesting story because I was never a player, but I lived the majority of my adult life in New Zealand, and so from that perspective, it's part of the blood here. You can't
went into the water. Came into the water.
And for the last, I guess 10 years while I was in New Zealand, I now live in Dublin, although I happen to be in Auckland right now. I can explain that. I came down for the World Cup draw and I just decided to stay because it's a bit more relaxed in this country than it is right now in Dublin in terms of how you can live. But I backed on the apartment I was living on, backed onto the Petone Rugby Club, actually Petone Rowing Club in the front, Petone Rugby Club at the back. So I used to be able to sort of sit just on the deck and watch the Petone Rugby Club do their thing. But yeah, so, my background, it kind of came into rugby because I had a wider sports background. So, I was very involved in aquatic sports through majority of my athletic career. And then when I retired from, kind of being a water polo, synchronized swimmer, competitive swimmer kind of person, I
like how you say it very casually. Like, this is not like some of the hardest sports. Just a little bit of water polo, a little synchronized swimming. No big deal. Competitive swimming. I just know how to float into what.
I always refer when people say to me, "Have I played rugby?" I said, "Well, I played water polo." There's kind of a lot of similarities there. So I talk about that being my rugby in the water. Although I have been introduced in the job since I've been at World Rugby to videos of underwater rugby games. So that's kind of interesting. So that would be a fun thing to give a try, particularly if you're in some tropical place.
I mean, I have some places in mind,
Yeah, exactly.
Oceania area. Maybe they might have some opportunities there.
Possibly. But yeah, so I came into rugby. Basically, when I finished being a competitive athlete, I started getting involved in sport as a volunteer, sort of got involved in games team management, mostly like World Aquatic Games and things like that. And then whilst I was doing I did a master's degree in sports management, I was approached by the New Zealand government to come and work in sport. And I just kind of had, I'm so fortunate when I think back. I ended up working for about 25 years in a variety of different parts of the New Zealand sports system, including, I guess I always talk about my legacy was in the high performance space. Right. But I got to a stage, I left, and I was married to a rugby player for quite a bit of that period of time. We're not married anymore, but, so I kind of sort of was also sort of the fan engagement, coming along, watching the rugby when I wasn't doing my thing as well.
Right.
But then I kind of sort of stepped out of sport and was doing some other things. It was still in sport and governance, but kind of stepped out to do some other things more in the kind of performing arts world and a bit more in aquatics.
Kind of give it a little bit more roundedness to where you were trying to envision.
And I'll tell you a story about that, about sport and art. I think there's a much more emergence and potential of those two industries working closer together. So it's kind of a personal belief of mine. But anyway, so I kind of won this award, which was pretty exciting, from the New Zealand government, where I won a Lifetime Achievement Award for my contribution to sport.
You casually saying big things is going to be the theme of the day, isn't it?
It was quite exciting. And it was one of those really weird moments when I had no idea where I was. I mean, I was going along to another sports dinner, and I didn't really want to go. And my daughter kind of said, "Mom, you know, I think I've been in Houston. It was just before the Rio Olympics, and I was working with the swim team, the New Zealand swim team, helping them with their pre-games training camp, which we were getting up and running in Houston. And I got this invitation to go along to this awards dinner. And I said to Abby, I said, look, my daughter's 25. I said, look, Abby, if there's two things that I'd like you to do while I'm away before I get back, is get me out of that dinner. I am not going to do it. I will be too tired. And I was going to come straight off a plane and from the States into a dinner. And then the other thing, is probably not relevant for this audience. I get to Wellington, and she says to me, "Oh, Mom, don't forget you've got the dinner." And I said, "What dinner?" And she said, "The dinner that you're going to." I said, "Abby, I'm not going to the dinner." And she said, "Yes, you are." She said, "Mom, you've got to contribute back to sport." This is my 25-year-old right today. Anyway, so I went along to this dinner because she made me feel so guilty. Sat down, and unbeknownst to me, I was given this amazing award, and my whole family had been invited, and I didn't know that they were there. And when I was up getting the award, the light went on the table, and there was my mom and my dad, and it was all very tearful. Anyways, that aside,
beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, that's absolutely beautiful. Like, your daughter had one job to do, and she actually did it well. I mean, not in your favor initially, but it still was very good at what she did.
Exactly. She was very, very persuasive. Very, very persuasive. Anyways, the outcome of that dinner was that I did go away, when I was listening to what I would call my eulogy, but of course it wasn't my eulogy, but my legacy of what I had done. And I thought, oh gosh, I really love working in sport. What are they saying? Lifetime Achievement Award. And I made up my mind. I thought, open up to possibilities. Something's going to come along, and that's where you need to be. And then I saw this job, and oh my gosh. So here, literally 2 weeks later, I was approached saying, did you see the job that's going at World Rugby in Dublin as the general manager of women's rugby? And I thought, wow, that looks interesting. So I just started doing some investigations about, what that might be, and, how would I feel at the age of 50 of moving to the other side of the world by myself and living in Dublin. And you know what? I just decided to put on my big girl pants and give it a shot and see what happens. And, it's the most amazing job. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the amazing people I've met all around the world. And every time when someone asks me what I do, and, you cannot but smile when I say I'm responsible for developing women's rugby around the world. Mm-hmm. And they then say, oh, do you mean in Ireland? And I say, no, I do mean in Ireland, but not in Ireland. Oh, well, where do you mean? I said, the world. And, it's just such a privilege. Such a privilege. Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's how I got involved. So I never played. I've watched lots from my back deck back in Petone in Wellington. Clearly I was a big supporter, and I have lots and lots of very, very close friends that were very integral inside the New Zealand Rugby Union, because I used to look after sport. And I have met so many new friends over the last 4 years while I've had this amazing role.
That's awesome. I love, there's a lot to be able to build out from. And if you want to continue to casually say big things, I'm also here for that as well, too. But I love the factor of being able to kind of have this non-traditional journey into it, because of the fact that we do always wonder sometimes. For me, it's always been wondering how much you are able to grow the game by doing things that happen to feel the same. Always, like, what has already been done, been continuing it on. So for you coming outside the sport and ending up in this position, now your perspective comes out much wider. And you kind of mentioned one that I am a very big advocate of, mixing the arts and sport together, particularly with rugby. Mm-hmm. So when you first stepped into it, you're coming from this multiple sports background. Obviously, swimming is your bread and butter, your foundation. What was at least one of the challenges that you had whenever it came to starting to take your position in that role? Because, again, rugby still provides something different, a different set of challenges, especially from a global standpoint. All things are definitely not equal.
No, they're not. I mean, I think that, one of the biggest challenges, because I really do believe that cross-industry, cross-sports is the way of fast-tracking and creating stuff that's really, really special. But when you come into a rugby environment, which at that stage was incredibly male-dominated, I remember I was kind of turned up at a meeting before I started in the role in Buenos Aires, and it was a council meeting. And of course, when I started, there was no woman on council. It was governed by 30 men. And it was a very male-dominated kind of environment. But I think that sometimes, when you do that, you're quite right. You can look at things very, very objectively. And when I came on, so the biggest challenge for me was I didn't have what I call credits in the bank. Like in New Zealand, I had a bit of reputation of being a pretty good sports administrator. Right. I walk into Dublin, I work into an environment. I had that New Zealand factor because everyone just assumed I played rugby.
Of course.
I must be a black fern.
Anybody that crosses over that island walkway, you immediately are, you didn't know, you're a black fern, you are part of every national team ever, and you might have played some professional. Woman or man?
Woman or man, definitely. But what I did was I kind of decided really early, because it was such an exciting time to join rugby. You just had the most amazing Olympic Games in Rio, and people were talking about rugby, and we were talking about it being the biggest growth. So it was on a roll. And really what it just needed, and there'd been some great stuff that had happened prior to me being involved. So it wasn't starting completely from scratch. But what I did was I just kind of decided, well, you play to your strengths. And you certainly don't try and pretend you're something that you're not. I mean, I'm not, I would never start commentating on a rugby game, and I don't pretend that I'm a rugby coach, but I understand coaching, and I understand strategy, and I understand relationships, and I understand how you get people to really understand where good practice exists. So I kind of decided I had 3 mantras, which I keep repeating. And the first was I was brought in to develop a strategy to really take the game to the next level that people could believe in, that I developed it with the people, with the people, for the people. That sounds like I'm standing for some election, but it was very much about listening, learning, understanding some of the challenges and the opportunities, understanding some of the frustrations that had been there in the past, and understanding where some of the wins were. So the first thing, develop a strategy that everyone could believe in. The next one was to connect great practice and good practice inside the organization, inside the industry called rugby, inside sport, and across sectors. So connect good practice. And to do that, I think that one of the real challenges, I'd worked in sport for a long time, and I had worked in a couple of other, not international sport organizations, but in like high performance organizations. And, I was very conscious of the fact that quite often global organizations kind of set themselves up if they know everything, right. So that if you turn around and pretend that you are the experts, there's only one way to go from there. it's down. So kind of really trying to position us as a learning organization, recognizing that what we were was a catalyst for change, and that what I needed to do was to connect all the great things that were happening and the great people that were happening, and see how I could make that be even better. And then the third part, which I thought was really important, and I have a very, very good friend. Actually, I had dinner with her just 2 days ago, because she happens to be here as well. And her name is Soraya Behrman, and she's got my role in FIFA. So she's the chief women's officer for FIFA, women's football. And she is from Auckland, and she got the job about 2 weeks after I was appointed into rugby. She was appointed into FIFA, and we met in Auckland, and we said she was heading off to Zurich, I was heading off to Dublin, and we agreed that we would meet regularly, support each other, and challenge and check each other. And so, it's been interesting watching the FIFA model unfold and the rugby model unfold, because we started with the same kind of stuff. What are you going to do? And so one of my big challenges was, which is quite different from the FIFA's, is that it was about getting the accountability in the right place inside the organization and across the globe to drive the change. And by that, I mean, when I arrived, there was very much there's going to be a general manager of women's rugby, and she's going to save things, or she's going to fix things, or she's going
to be the savior.
I'm going to save her. And anything that said woman or girls might have been stuck on the woman, the gentleman, And so the first thing that I guess I did was to work with Brett, who's now leaving, but Brett and Bill and those guys to say, look, we either run a model which means you have to build a unit, or we run a decentralized model which says everyone in this organization at World Rugby is accountable for women's rugby. It is not just me. So rather than have a huge unit, what I needed to do was to work with the chief executive to make sure that the KPIs are right across the organization in competition and commercial and in profile and development to really drive and get a sustained change. With the ultimate brief that if we're successful in this role over, the strategy is 8 years, you shouldn't need to have a general manager of women's rugby. You should
because of the fact that you liquidate into each other.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are the three things, develop a strategy, connect great practice, and drive accountability inside and outside the organization. That would drive the change that we wanted to see. And then we just started.
Yo, I love it. Well, and it's kind of interesting because of the fact of when it started too, because it wasn't just the factor that you had the Olympics right before that year before, but you were now Women's Rugby World Cup coming down in September. That was what you got in about March-ish?
January. Yep.
So you're talking about. Say that again.
So So in my first year, I started up in Dublin in January, and in December that year, we signed off on an 8-year strategy. But in that period, there was the World Cup in
Ireland,
in Dublin and Belfast in Ireland, and I used that as part of the kind of fact finding, getting to know the people who were key to what should be in that strategy that we approved in December. So so it was kind of a quick deep dive into being a sponge for a year. Learning, listening, and coming up with something that made sense.
And the other part that I loved about that, because I still want to even ask on the Women's Rugby World Cup, but what I really love about is the concept of accountability. And it was something that even now, as the pandemic has gone through, that I have been hoping to be able to see happen because of the fact that there's always, it goes back to what I said, traditionalism. There's been the tradition of things happening in this occurrence. We're talking 1995, we're finally getting amateurism before the other 150, 200 years. You're working within this old model. All of a sudden, the change, now a whole new set of opportunities grow. Now we're 25 years later, or I guess by that point it was maybe 22 years later. Now you are setting up a new era of rugby that's coming in. It's one that I think has become more women focused. It's one that has become more culturally focused, not rugby culturally, but respective countries' perspective of culture focused. Yep. And then, of course, I like to say the safety era, where now we are trying to understand the actual medical impacts of it. But in that, to know that there was still the idea of you take care of yours, I guess autonomy within the sections, to say the least, is an interesting one, and it does make sense. So for you, obviously, as you're telling them to do that, now when you're looking for these people and trying to bring it together, like, are you getting a lot of pushback as a result? Because it's just, again, business as usual, and we're like, okay, now we'll change, or just, okay, we're open now because we have to, because perception and reality.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I probably get labeled a bit as a disruptor.
Yes! Revolutionize!
I'm very happy with that. I mean, I was brought in to drive a transformation change, and you sometimes you have to push, sometimes you pull, sometimes you might say things that are awkward for other people in the room. I mean, World Rugby and the globe of rugby is kind of, it's probably pretty typical of lots of other sports where women are doing something that some people think they shouldn't be doing in terms of it's not your world. Now we obviously disagree with that, but there will be people that you work with that absolutely on board and they love it and they can't wait and they want it to go faster. There are people that you work with that don't, and there will be people that don't. And then there'll be a mixture of people that you work with that, flip and flop between who's in the room. So you have to actually make sure you work. So it's been a huge stakeholder engagement. But to be honest, the changes that we have been able to do, and I definitely say we, because it is a collaborative effort across at a global level in World Rugby in an incredibly short time, I think are amazing. When I arrived, we set about to create this strategy, and it wasn't like nothing had ever happened before. There was a really great woman, Sue Carty, who's actually on the World Rugby Council now representing Ireland, who was a development manager at World Rugby, and she did a lot of work in development. But when I looked at what was going on, I sort of said, well, development is important, like what happens in unions in terms of participation programs. But if we don't fundamentally change the leadership and the people that are making the decisions to ensure that they reflect the people that are playing the game, you'll always be at the whim of someone deciding that they should do something. So we kind of set up the strategy that had 5 pillars. So it was development, continue on the great work that Sue had done. Right. Performance, which was, and you can talk a little bit more about that, was because we knew that we had have a big gap in the 15s program in particular. 7s was going well, but that was about high performance, quality competitions, inspiring the next generation to get involved and competitive pathways. Leadership, which is a big one, which I'll come back to because there was a huge gap there. Profile with impact. We've done some pretty cool stuff, I think, in terms of our Try and Stop Us campaign and some of the other things that have happened globally. And then diversified investments, creating a commercial program. But fundamentally, the first thing we needed to do was leadership. Right. If we could, and so, I'm really proud to say is that the people that I worked with at World Rugby, and particularly Bill Beaumont and Gus Pichot at the time, and Brett, recognized that we had a real image, look, and feel problem. And so when we were getting ready to develop the plan and sign it off, and a couple of people were talking about quotas. Should we put quotas in for unions about how many women on boards and stuff like that? And I just said, hold on, guys. We cannot do that. Look at us. We are a council of 31. And so, and Bill said, you're absolutely right. And as a result of that, there was some thinking led by some of the senior managers internally, and Bill drove a change. And so when we signed off on the strategy, we brought 17 women directors onto the board of World Rugby. So it went from 0 to 35%, just like that. And most of the other international federations said, how did that possibly happen? Well, it happened because there was a total belief that how we looked, how we felt, how we were making decisions was wrong. 27% of your membership are growing are women, yet we were 30 men. And though, it's kind of funny. So now, the look and feel is different. We're just in the middle of a further governance review, and they've now made a target to move towards 40% on our committees and all our subcommittees. We are seeing women we developed a pipeline program of scholarships, and that's driven a change in kind of senior leaders inside organizations. I mean, we're
talking about pipeline programs in terms of getting to administrative positions, or pipeline programs in terms of just like performance and training on the field, or just basic leadership within their own unions themselves?
Yeah. No, we developed a pipeline program. So in the leadership, I sort of said, okay, we need to fix and work on improving the diversity on the highest level decision. So the governance. And we also needed to work on, senior leaders inside the organization. So how do we get more women into senior leadership positions? And I defined those as chief executives or direct reports to the chief executives. And then we had another whole thing that we might talk about in terms of we needed to change the diversity look and feel in terms of coaching. Right. And we've got more work to do on match officials, and I'm just about to start a really cool project in terms of athlete support. But so the pipeline program we put in place was a scholarship program, and the U.S. RAN has been very involved in that, where we allocate 2 scholarships per region on an annual basis for amazing women who want to be even more amazing, to actually help them achieve their dreams and also add real leadership input to rugby. So it's not about woman leading woman. It's about woman in senior positions in general. Rugby. Yeah. So people I'm not sure if you've interviewed Dr. Aruba Chinto-Ru from Canada.
I'm literally, it was funny. Because I talk with Rand, and those are my guys over there, and I wanted to set up a meeting with her. I'm gonna have to do one personally because we were working on something, but she's one that I actually was looking at just the other day, just because of the fact that of where she's at and what she's been trying to do in Canada, and I didn't know to the extent of the scope of what she's been doing.
Yeah, so she's done some great stuff. So that you've got there's some great leaders. The Executive Leadership Scholarship people from RAN, Rugby America's North. They set up a group called WILD, Women in Leadership Directors. It's got people like Jen Hendrich. It's got people like Maria Thomas from Trinidad, Jill Potter. I mean, just a whole good group of women who are trying to drive change and so those are on scholarships. So we put scholarships together to actually allow them to explore, learn good practice, create a network. And, the changes, like I was just saying this morning, I was talking to someone in Ireland, and I was just saying, when I first arrived and I went to Buenos Aires, and at that stage, they were having these council meetings, and people from South America, and they were going on about how, women don't really play rugby in South America. They play hockey. You go into a club in Argentina, the women play hockey, the men play rugby, and it's never going to change. Well, we've now got Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, all with woman chief executives.
Yes.
I mean, wow. And, Barbie Pichot, who is now appointed both in Africa and in South America. We have kind of woman directors that are driving some of the programs at a regional level. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And so many. We've got 5 or 6 of our executive leadership scholarships are now on council. So they're part of the World Rugby Council members. And just scattering right across the Pacific. I mean, I just get so proud when I sit and I listen. We try to do a lot of profiles to track these people because it's all about, if you see it, you can believe it. Of course. Just seeing what they're doing for rugby, woman in rugby, driving rugby. And so that to me was so important in terms of getting sustained change, was to create that network of leaders at a governance and a senior level inside unions who could support each other and really drive rugby's change for the benefit of rugby, which means a much stronger women's contingent.
And, I love, and that part always has made sense to me, especially whenever I started playing. So I started playing maybe about 12 years ago or so. So even in the development, one of the areas that always felt odd to me initially was you have this whole entity. This is one sport where contacts is primary and is expected that women play outside of individual sports, aka MMA and boxing. And then you could talk about maybe American football, but I don't think it's going to have the playing that rugby can just by the culture of the sport here in the States. And even field hockey is not going to ever be to the extent, I guess maybe water polo. But when you're talking about on average, a team sport, rugby was one that women have the most congregation to. And I remember whenever I went and saw the Atlanta Sevens a few years back, maybe about 2014, 2015, and you saw that the level of talent actually matches the expectations that you have for the national team. So basically, you're playing with the best athletes. They play smoothly, amazingly, and hit hard, faster than you ever expect. Not just ever expected, like fast, like you expect from an elite player. So when you have this section that's able to develop, and you also have a corner on a niche that is basically on its own in the grander scheme, you would think go ahead and tap that because that is your growth rate. Like if you get women involved, the men will come either from children or it's just going to be a complementary condition, almost tennis, the same concept that tennis had. So the fact that you guys started pushing down more into that, I love it. And the scholarship component. Now, with the scholarship, was that in the factor of like you helped them to find classes and help them afford for classes, or was this travel to be able to train at the World Rugby facilities, or what was the extent of these scholarships?
And of course, if you guys love this podcast or even like it, we just need a few favors from you. If you guys can you go onto Apple Podcasts? Can you guys leave a review for us? anything works, whether preferably we want the 5 stars, but we want your most honest review because it helps us get found a lot more. Secondly, if you guys can, please share this podcast. Let your friends know. We get the most algorithmic pushes whenever these things are shared, not just liked, but shared. Every listen counts, and we appreciate everything that you guys do. If you feel like there's real information that comes from it, please continue to push that along. And finally, if you guys can, check us out on YouTube. Like our YouTube channel, youtube.com/GiftTime Rugby Network. Obviously, we want to continue to be able to show just a visual as well, and continue to push this as our show as we continue to grow over the next few years, and especially leading into the Olympics and the Rugby World Cup. And of course, like us on Instagram at Grow Rugby Show, GREAUX Rugby Show, and all one word. And obviously, it allows you to see whenever we're posting up something, and we're going to keep trying to get updated. We're getting there. All the process, man. This is something about developing rugby industry, so enjoy it, and I want to thank you guys so much for this.
Yeah. The scholarships, I mean, we call them executive leadership scholars. So we work with the regions to identify people who are either new to boards, sort of governance level, or who are in senior leadership, or who have the ability to be there in 2 years. It's a £10,000 scholarship, so it's quite significant. But we sit down with them as part of their application. They kind of put forward their story, who they are, what they've done, what their vision is, and what they think they need to do to get there. We work with the regions, and it's actually happening now. So RAN will be submitting. I think, but everyone's got to the end of this month to submit the next year's scholarship recipients. So we then get the regions to prioritize, with the lists of amazing women, who do they want to put forward. We provide them with a mentor from somewhere else in the world, because, it's actually about getting some global perspective as well.
And that network increasing too. Right?
Yeah, and the scholarship they do, it kind of really varies. We've tried to make sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's about what works for them. And it doesn't have to be one thing, a lot of them have done international travel. I think of Maria Thomas from Trinidad. I kind of first met her. I was speaking at a conference in Botswana, and there was 4 of the leadership scholarship recipients that decided to go to this conference. It was a huge international women in sport conference. So she was down there, and now she's just come back a very long time. She was doing a master's degree in Russia. She was stuck in Russia for quite some period of time. So she did a mixture of international travel, some dedicated courses, some conferencing, and just some kind of learning from other unions. So it's what is right for you. I think that one of the really big success stories, and I talk about the scholarship programs, was when the first scholarship recipients came through from Africa, and we had these women, and there was this woman who was the president of Burkina Faso. Her name is Roland Foro. And Roland, I met in Botswana at a women's leadership conference on how they're going to take rugby in Africa the next level. And she couldn't speak English. She was fluent French, and she couldn't speak English. So I have a very pidgin French kind of perspective. So we got on. There's lots of hugs and shakes.
Middle ground.
Anyways, she wanted to learn it. She decided she wanted to get involved globally in World Rugby, and she needed to master English. So her scholarship revolved around mastering English. And I have to tell you, she's now on the board of Rugby Africa. So she's the president of Burkina Faso. She's on the board of Rugby Africa, and she's Rugby Africa's council member on World Rugby. And she is on several subcommittees. And she was at I was privileged to go to the World Cup in Japan.
Yeah.
And there was a council meeting there, and she came running up to me, fluent English, and gave me a hug. And I was just, what can you say? Does that not make you laugh? So there she is, and she's a mover and a shaker, and she's just doing great things in the rugby continent of Africa. But so it's everything from that through to full-time university programs through to personal development. It's what does it take to actually help you get to that special spot where you can really lead and feel confident. That's what they're about. They're really cool.
See, I want so kind of you spoke on this, going to the Rugby World Cup in Japan. So a friend of mine, we actually ended up doing a bike ride from Singapore to Tokyo. It's literally Singapore to Tokyo, and bike riding through Southeast Asia, essentially, getting to see it, and then on our way to the 2019 Rugby World Cup. And one thing that I was able to kind of see through that was the usage of rugby, not just to change an environment, because we always know about, the individual change, but how it actually changes the culture of an area. Namely, the one that stood out the most was with in Cambodia with this group Kampuchea Balap, run by Nicholas Olivri. And the girls that were under his program, this was one, never seen such young girls absolutely dominate into tackles. Like it was unfair, the amount of domination that they were doing. I was like, wow. But what really stood out was when talking with them, you hear about obviously the stories that they have. And it was the confidence that gets built up for the women, the girls themselves. And then on top of that, because of the confidence they've built up from being able to play and knowing that they can do this competition, their expectations of what they want for themselves increase substantially. To do that, and that means you're completely changing the way your culture, and this, because of such a young generation, this is literally going to change the country over the course of 40 years, from just these 1, 2, 3, 4 years of playing rugby. And to hear that, and you used a perfect example with this lady from Burkina Faso, to have her learn, that is a cultural change that will resonate itself back. Which is where I've always felt like has been needing to promote rugby was its global impact in terms of how you can create the opportunities, not so much as less so than the pitch, but just not maybe equal to or a little bit higher than what you do on the pitch, because it something facilitates differently.
And I have to say, that was the real attraction for me. I've been very fortunate in my sporting career in terms of both as an athlete and as a volunteer. And then I was responsible for New Zealand's high performance system. So I've been to, 9 Olympic and Commonwealth Games. I've been to a lot of the kind of glitzy, aspirational, inspirational, I'll borrow something from a colleague, eye-watering experience stuff. I didn't need to do more of that. It's fun, it's great. But what really hooked me on, was when I applied for this job, I kind of really felt that I wanted to do something where sport was used for development in terms of women's empowerment and social change. And the project I was asked to do as part of my interview process was, what would I do with £100,000 to develop rugby for girls in Asia, linked to the Rugby World Cup and the Tokyo Olympics? And to do that, I called them back and I said, okay, look, for me to do this properly, it was an interview. I said, I need to know where I'm in this process, because I have to call a lot of people in Asia that don't know me, and I don't know. I don't even know if we're speaking the same language. Anyways, I was really fortunate. I was told I was in the top 3, so I thought, I'm going to do this. And I contacted a lady, a very, very famous ex-Blackburn World Rugby Hall of Famer called Anna Richards, who was at that stage coaching in Hong Kong. And she connected with me with quite a few of the people who were coaching or involved in women's rugby in Asia. And I came across, which is probably maybe what you saw in Cambodia, I came across this program called Pass It Back, Child Fund Pass It Back.
Yep, I know them too. Which was a program that was aimed at, and I just looked at this and I thought, oh my gosh, this is why I want to do this. This is absolutely why I want to do this. And, with rugby for Sport for Development, we've been really, really lucky. We've partnered with a variety of different NGOs in different parts of the world. So Child Fund in Asia, UN Women in Oceania, a variety of different and so we've been able to look at, social development goals and how do we make life better for people. And I have to say, I'm always really proud when I think about what we really tried to portray with our Try and Stop Us campaign is that rugby is a game for all shapes and sizes, all cultural aspects, and that it is growing phenomenally in places that you just would not think it would. Right. And, it's in Iran, it's in Malaysia, it's in Pakistan, it's in India. Exactly.
And, I've got a lady who I'm due to speak to in the next few weeks who's doing a research project. And why is rugby, as such a physically contact sport, growing so much amongst Muslim women? And you know what? It's a question that I really want to delve into, because there's something special about our sport. You know, the passion that people put in, and that it is excelling in places where human rights may be very questionable in terms of women and where they fit and what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And so I think, you know, it's an amazing sport to actually drive those social change and stigma about what people can and cannot do. And there's something about that power, you know, that when we talk about rugby builds character, it's that physical power, it's that collegiate experience on the pitch. It makes leaders for life, and it creates that support, and it allows you to step up and stand up to things that might not be great. In a non-rugby environment, knowing that you've got a support network of people that are there to support you with it. I mean, it's such a huge, I mean, we talk about it being a club of all clubs. People who play rugby all love rugby players. And, you know, you can just pick up, you know, Gift, you can pick up your ball and you can turn up in Invercargill and you can just go and play a game with the rugby. And, you know, people are just so welcoming and embracing. It is such a, you know, I used to know lots of Kiwis, you know, they always go overseas and they do their big OE because, you know, we're in this little isolated island. It's probably a bit blissful right now, but it's so far away from the rest of the world. They take their backpack and they take their rugby ball.
Right.
And it's kind of like this global handshake. Hey, can we play? You know, it's quite special. It's very, very special.
And that really was the same reason why it actually sold me as well. Because again, for me, I play football. You know, I've played soccer. I'm a contact sport guy for the most part. So, you know, being on the pitch was a natural experience. I mean, don't get me wrong, you get the nuance stuff like that. But what actually ended up taking me over was the network, and then actually even more so, which was maybe about 4 years ago, 2016, so 5 years ago, when I actually went out of the country playing rugby. And then you start to actually feel like the breadth of it, and you feel that network that comes along with it. So, but at the same time, when I went overseas, I also got to see, weirdly enough, the same issues that I feel happen in non-rugby, like even in the U.S., I feel is the almost same problem that you have in Brazil, which is the same problem that you have in Singapore, well, maybe not Singapore, but in like Malaysia, or the same problem that you have in the Caribbean. Like, there's always these few integral problems that seem to be resonating, and it kind of came back to this idea of, despite us knowing how, you know, connected rugby is, how passionate people are for rugby, yet in every country, rugby still doesn't stand to be in that top three for the most part. Like, it's New Zealand, slightly South Africa, ironically, and then like
England a bit. Well, no, not really. Yeah. No,
exactly. And then the Oceania Islands at that.
Fiji.
So exactly, Fiji primarily, Samoa, and exactly. So if you have it in every country, you know that the people love it who played or in association with it in every country are really deep into it. Why has it still been so hard for it to rise up the rankings of national notoriety of a team? Like in England, you would think it would be a top 3 sport, but I would argue that football is number 1. You probably might put basketball there, maybe cricket and netball number 3 or 4, and then maybe rugby right at that bottom part. And even South Africa was the same: netball, soccer, that, and then you have rugby, despite the fact that these are major rugby countries. So from what you were, as you're looking at it from the inside out a little bit, what is it that you're seeing that could be creating this trend?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is changing. I mean, we talk about, you know, we started from a reasonably small base in comparison to some of those other global sports. I mean, like I said, I mean, I kind of meet, like I said, I meet regularly with football, my football equivalent. And I talk about how we've got, you know, 2.7 million women playing football, and she talks about 30 million, you know, so we're at kind of different set of scales. True. But some of our challenges are the same. I mean, I think that one of the things that we have tried to do from the woman's perspective is the fact that we needed to address the international global calendar. I mean, the people who play rugby in the Six Nations area, they're so lucky, that they've got that regular competition for 15s. Sevens, okay, it's kind of growing. It's getting there. But when it came to 15s, huge gaps in the global. If you were, there's a World Cup once every 4 years, but there wasn't a regular competition besides that for anywhere else. So we've been spending quite a bit of time trying to, and so watch this space is what I can say. That hopefully we'll have some really exciting news coming out in the next couple of months about something that's really special that I think is going to be a game changer for the growth of women's rugby.
Juicy.
But the other stuff, I guess the thing is that's kind of, I don't know. I mean, when I look at other countries, it seems that rugby in a lot of those countries, you come into it as a late, as a more mature adult. Right. Whereas some of those sports, you're starting from, sort of from scratch. Now that's not the same. So in New Zealand, you pick up a rugby ball when you're 3. We start playing. But in other countries, I know that it's something that you start at university level, and so it's kind of, you've got that huge kind of gap of building that pipeline that needs to be addressed. So sort of understanding what's going on. Is it the first sport that people have done, or is it the second or third sport that they've done? But what we do know is that when people play, they love it.
They get in. You're locked.
And all sorts of people. There's just, we're really lucky. We've got Angela Ruggiero from, the amazing ice hockey medalist from the States, 4 times Olympian, who's on our board. And she was telling me that she just can't wait to play. She's based in New York. And I said, well, I need to connect you with, I think she knows Phaedra.
That's a homie right there.
That's a history there. But so I think things are changing. I mean, clearly, one of our biggest things that we need to grapple with is the perception about the safety associated with our sport. So, I mean, I think, I have been incredibly impressed. One of the jobs I had prior to coming to work at World Rugby was I was responsible for injury prevention in New Zealand. And a subset of that was sports injury prevention. So we had kind of quite a unit. We actually had a dedicated rugby person, but we looked right across sports because I worked for an organization called ACC, and in New Zealand, you're covered 24/7. If you have an injury, the government covers you, whether it's in sport and home, on the road, or whatever, you're covered. Right. So when I arrived at World Rugby, the amount of investment that's put in terms of injury prevention and education and coach education, and providing leadership to other sports that are physically demanding. So there certainly is a huge emphasis to make sure that we can make this sport as fair and safe as possible. But that is obviously a challenge for some people. They look at it and they sort of think, it is a physically demanding sport. That will be attractive to some people. It'll be attractive for some people from an audience and an engagement perspective, and others from a playing perspective. But what I do know is I don't know many people who have not tried, who have tried rugby that haven't got hooked in it. You know what I mean?
I say
from a watching perspective. I always talk about the taxi driver test. When I was in Dublin, whenever I go to the Olympics or something like that. The fact is, you're sitting in there with a taxi, and if a taxi driver starts to talk to you and says to you, "Have you watched the women's rugby that's on in Belgium?"
Right.
And then they start saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think women were going to ever be any good at this, but my gosh, that game was better than any men's game I ever saw." It's kind of cool. So it's one of those addictive sports, isn't it? We just need to create more opportunities for the addiction.
I agree. I still stand by. I feel like there is a cultural factor within rugby of absolute humility within the team. So it makes it difficult to have the marketable voice, because to marketably voice means that you have to bring spotlight to self. And I think that might be kind of part of the cultural issue that goes along with it.
No I in team. Yeah.
Exactly. So one thing that you spoke about in terms of what you wanted to develop, and I'm not going to take you too much longer, but I got to get these 2 out, and I'll be honest with you, I could talk to you all day because you are so bloody interesting. I love it. But, you talked about one of the pillars that you wanted to work on was commercial development, which is one issue that I think has been prominent in just about every rugby country. I don't care, big or small, seems to be the prominent issue. Now, I've talking with friends even here. I had one of my friends, his name's Tozan Tutatanwe. one thing he always used to say that is within the U.S., rugby doesn't know what it wants to be. Does it want to be an adult rec league? Does it want to be a serious professional? Or does it want to just be an amateur social kind of process? So a lot of that obviously changes towards what you want to do. And I think for the most part, people want to be able to play while supporting something and then at least be able to see a high level of it be able to be performed regularly. For you, this part, when it comes to a worldwide aspect, we talk about these small countries, the Asias, up in the continent of Africa, within the Middle East, and then let's not even talk about what we're doing in South America, even here in North America. What is it that you have been able to see that comes with maybe the issue that a lot of rugby teams or rugby programs, unions and such are having when it comes to engaging with commercial entities? And what do you feel is it possible that World Rugby, at least from your position, is able to do to kind of facilitate that, help that?
Yeah. Chasing the commercial dollar is hard. I mean, it is. I mean, it's not easy. We've got that fourth pillar. The last pillar in the global strategy for women is about creating diversified income streams. And in there, and it deliberately talks about diversified in that we talk about 4 different things that we're going to try to do. One is the strict commercial, which I'll talk a little bit about. The next is how do you create more meaningful for-purpose funding partnerships? So the NGOs and the agreements and stuff like that. So where are the win-wins in terms of social change and things that rugby can do in terms of building communities and working with at-risk kids and all that kind of stuff? So there's that. And how do we actually the third one is kind of philanthropy. And I think that's once again, that's an area that I think that we could learn a lot more from the arts world on. Sports has been overly great. I mean, I know in the States, there's a very successful rugby foundation.
USA Rugby Foundation.
I don't know that happens everywhere around the world. So, a couple of the unions have them, some don't, but actually understanding that, if you think about where people are that were rugby players and where they sit in the commercial society and how do you actually get them back from a philanthropy perspective to donate? So how do you set up the trust? But the fourth bit, and I'll go back to the commercial, is about capability build. A lot of our unions and a lot of the organizations you're talking about do not have the resources to have leading commercial directors that have the capability and skills to drive the commercial programs, let alone service them. So we've kind of made a commitment to also see what is it that we can do to help in that space to provide toolkits so that organizations actually understand how to go about it. And so then going back to the first thing is looking at it from a commercial perspective and a woman's perspective. Up until last year, the commercial deals for rugby were all what I call bundled. Right. So so what we would sign off on was worldwide partners that would be associated with the Rugby World Cup for men. And as part of negotiating, be part of the Rugby World Cup for men, you would also have thrown into that agreement, oh, yes, and you can have the woman, and you can have the under-20s. So it was kind of an agreement that the rights for those others were all bundled up into one. So we made a call looking at the trends of what's going on globally and seeing what was happening at a regional level to unbundle the rights last year. So we decided that women's rugby was at a stage where it was growing, that it had sufficient potential from a commercial and a social change perspective to be sold separately. So we developed a separate commercial strategy for the women's game. And we did that by understanding what was going on around the globe. And what we've done is we're looking for, we're trying to look at the commercial perspective quite differently. So yes, big events are important. So, eyeballs. But in looking at the research in terms of women's corporate sponsorship, we know that people want to buy into more of the IP associated with social change stuff. So we're looking right now. So we developed a commercial strategy. We kind of launched it just after the World Cup in 2019, in the middle of a COVID kind of environment. So it's kind of was a bit bumpy. But we're kind of back on track now, where we're looking for 6 global partners of women in rugby. But each of those partners is linked to a pillar of work. So one for coaching, one for leadership, one for development group, and they get access to the IP that we're developing globally with that, as well as the traditional kind of brand eyeballs associated with events.
Nice.
So that's kind of like an interesting. So clearly we want to share that with our unions as a way, but we're just starting. We want to get some success stories of how it's going to work, and then show our unions how that actually can happen. But it's incredibly, it's a tough market out there in terms of commercial, and particularly when the world has got so many really good needs that are there. So I think that the challenge is to look slightly non-traditional at how you create your investment streams, having a diverse mix so that it's not just about finding sponsors, it's about finding strategic for-purpose funding partners. The CSIR stuff is also about philanthropy and having a wider look and feel about how you pull that all together.
And I think that was one area that I found very troublesome in that we've always been currently, because even within rugby clubs now, you can almost predict, and I feel like this has always been consistent on how a club wants to do it. It's we make it into a nonprofit, and then we will say that we're going to sell patches and names and something very minuscule to get $1,000-$2,000, and then hopefully rinse and repeat that, and of course then you go through the alumni base. Where it's like I get why people do it, because I'm sure there was a reason that template worked for a while, but it's not sustainable, and I think it constantly inhibits growth, especially if you have clubs that are in flux as they're developing. So you run into this issue of how do you get them to see further? And then again, you mentioned it right there. It's so hard there's a reason why it's a full-time job to go find brand deals and people often are not playing because they're looking to get paid. They got their jobs and their lives that they have to deal with. So trying to find that middle ground. And then if you're talking about from the collegiate side, it becomes that whole other issue of like, these are students, like they're students, like they're still having their lives. They're still growing in that aspect too. So you're basically asking them to do something big. So I do always wonder when it comes to if there's a serviceable means of being able to create even a blueprint for these teams and these regions and these unions to do it, because it feels like once you get past that level, then it's just about sustainability through recruiting, and then what can you do to create attention from there. And I guess all of it kind of revolves around the same thing.
It does. But, but it is about, sitting down with innovative people and maybe from a rugby club perspective, kind of bringing wider people into that thinking tank. I mean, I went out 2 nights ago, very fortunate because you can do that in New Zealand. And I went out with the commercial director of the New Zealand Olympic Committee. And she was talking to me about, they have an incredibly innovative, I thought, gosh, that's innovative, where they have so this is the look after the New Zealand, like the USOC. And they have a sponsorship deal with a home building company called Jetty and Homes. The sponsorship deal is like this. They build 5 homes. So they call them the Olympic houses. And they then sell these houses. Inside the houses is all the other products, so Panasonic and anything else that they have as sponsorships inside the house. So it becomes a show. It gets marketed as an Olympic home, so it gets kind of really cool Olympic, outfit signing and stuff like that. And the sponsorship deal is that they get the profit from the house when it's sold.
That's incredible. That is amazing.
I've heard, this maybe sounds very, very New Zealand. And I remember, I was working with some people in the Waikato, which is where the farming country is in New Zealand. And I remember there was deals that were being done with farmers, and where they would dedicate so many bobby calves to certain clubs. And when the cows grew, I mean, probably any vegetarians that are on this audience probably don't really like to feel that. I mean, it's just, I guess what I'm saying is it's thinking outside the square in terms of where the partnerships would be. And so, so that was the value of the growth in the farmer contributing towards the club. So, thinking outside the square, I think that's the kind of idea.
No, I love that. Like it, that is probably the most factual thing that can be said within that arena. Like, sometimes it is not even sometimes. It is absolutely about stepping outside of those bounds, especially whenever you have a sport that's, for most people, relatively either unknown or new for them. So like now you have this awe experience of, and for me, my experience has always been, if I tell somebody about rugby that I do in rugby, they'll be like, wow, You do that, you're crazy. Yo, that's a rough sport. And you're like, all right, well, look, I'm going to have to flex this a little bit. Yeah, it absolutely is. You know, we are badass. You know, why don't you come help us out a little bit? You want to be a part of that, attached to it. But it does add that that extra level of beneficial. What's the word I'm looking at? It's beneficial for both parties. Yeah. You know.
And I think the other thing, Gift, is when I think of some of the amazing people from rugby that I've met in the U.S. When I in my first year I came over to San Diego. I think it was for the trials for. Was it the men's trials for the World Cup, and there happened to be some women's games on. Anyways, I met they were inducting the women's national team into the Hall of Fame, and so I met quite a lot of the amazing women. And you were sort of sitting there and you're talking to them, and then I met them again. There was a conference that the Women's Rugby Coaches and Referees Association ran in the other side of the States quite a bit later. And I met some of them then, and you kind of sort of started talking to these people, and you found out what they were doing in their careers. So these were these. Oh my goodness! So like, quite often we don't think about expanding that network and keeping that network. I mean, we really want people who are involved in rugby to be involved in rugby for life. Right. And when you think about the importance of team sports and in terms of leadership development. A lot of these people are leading large companies. How do you connect them? I mean, we've got a group that's working with the World Cup in New Zealand right now, which they call the Wahine Toa. So Wahine woman from the island and the knowledgeable woman. Where Dame Julie Christie, who's the chair of the the Rugby World Cup for Women, brought together all these women who are head of banks, head of large corporations to sit down and think about. That some of them have been associated with rugby. How do they actually use their contacts to look at creating more investment into the game? So I think there's kind of ways of, unpicking who knows who in a more systematic way, and what people are currently doing in their roles, and how do you actually try and tap into some of that incredible knowledge and expertise and leadership.
No, and it goes back again. The global network, the global club that rugby is. Yeah. It is a net that spreads far wider than people ever expected to, and it's kind of the amazing part. So it makes sense to try and go tap into it, and I think that part has always been interesting to me, because you do find out like, oh, you guys you're a medical doctor, or you're working in this corporation. I've met so many people who ended up being like either this massive architect, or they are this dentist, high-level dentist. So, these really professional careers that you go like, I wouldn't have even put the connection, because, well, there's nothing that ever made me think about it in some way, shape. But it is incredible what some of the backgrounds are that go with that.
Yeah.
Kind of wrapping it down on this, you obviously, man, we're gonna have to do this again, Katie. We'll do it again.
As we go to the World Cup, maybe we're at the World Cup. We can do
so here's the question that I need to ask. This is the number one. So what are we doing about the Rugby World Cup for this year? Because there's some of us who we are not necessarily in New Zealand, and we'd love to be able to come into New Zealand with our media, and we like to know, hey, can we be invited in? Obviously with the COVID. No. Obviously, New Zealand has a very strict COVID ruling when it comes to incoming foreigners. So, what is it that you guys are looking? Because I just saw an article talking about you guys are aiming to try and have the highest attendance record ever for a Rugby World Cup, and which is hitting a marker, especially after 2017. What is it that you guys are looking to plan to do within this pandemic restriction? Is there a plan in place, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously we're working incredibly closely, and this is one of those classic cases of we're just making sure the accountability lies in the right place across the organization. So we have an event director, a lady called Alison Hughes, who works at World Rugby, is part of the World Cup team, and then she works very closely with a very committed New Zealand organizing committee, and they, in conjunction, are working very closely with the government to make sure that they do everything they can. Clearly, safety is an issue. That New Zealand is a country that has got strict quarantine guidelines, and but we are working with the government to make sure that that we do what is right for both the country and the participants that are coming. So that will mean, so that will mean a mixture of things. It's really important to make sure that people who do not get to New Zealand can see everything, so that we make the as live environment in terms of our broadcasting as incredibly impressive and engaging for fans as possible.
Right.
But it's kind of tough. It is a tough environment. I mean, I'm really feeling for all the Olympic athletes who, that's happening beforehand, who have got some specific challenges about getting in and out of Tokyo, and quarantine associated with either side, back and forth as well. So what I can say is that it is discussions that are ongoing on a regular basis to make sure that everything that can be done will be done to make this the best ever. When it comes to audiences, well, clearly every single person in New Zealand is a rugby fan. So
true. You look. I expected 8 million people to be there. True stories.
Yeah, but so like I said, a very committed government. This New Zealand's hosting, which some people don't know. We're talking about. They talk about it being the Big Four. New Zealand is hosting the Rugby World Cup for women this year, the Cricket World Cup for women next year, and the Football World Cup for in a joint hosting with Australia the year after in 2023. And also they're hosting this huge conference, which is called the International Women's Sports Conference next year. So 4 major events in this country. So you've got a prime minister that's absolutely, and a deputy prime minister that are absolutely passionate about women, sports, leadership. And so it's an exciting place to be right now.
You just need to be able to get inside there and be able to actually do it. No, how much of it are you guys looking off of the Olympics? Because my theory has always been like what you guys do with the World Cup there is going to be based off of what the Olympic Committee ends up doing for Tokyo, 3-4 months prior to that. Are you guys in cahoots with them or?
Oh, yeah, clearly. I mean, at a World Rugby level, we're part of obviously we're an Olympic sport. So there's a lot of dialogue that happens with our competitions team from sevens to actually understand what are the key learnings. And there's been some trials. There's been some sports that have come and played in New Zealand in the closed, some netball teams that have come over, rugby teams that have come over. So they're kind of just trialing it as they go and just trying to refine it as much as possible. I guess the difference, we've got 9 out of 12 teams have qualified. I mean, one of our big challenges right now is how we qualify the remaining 3. And that needs to happen before the game starts as well. But yeah, lots of learning cross codes. Certainly, those 3 sports that I referred to that all have events in New Zealand are all talking very, very regularly about how we can make sure that we get the right environment in place for teams when they do come in quarantine.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Look, all I know is I'm looking for that one message that says, media passes are ready to be media accreditation is ready to be accepted. My name is going to be number probably like 1,000 because you guys got time zone on me, but I will be in that top 100 because this was said. I'm trying to get it to consistency. I got the Olympics. I got the first Rugby World Cup. I needed an excuse to come to New Zealand. I don't want you guys to take away this excuse. This is set the whole year. I mean, not you guys, but I don't want.
Are you going to bike there, Gift?
Hey, look, we do what we got to do. All right, get the legs nice and strong. Oh, Katie, thank you so much. This has been great, and I've learned so much. And like I said, we're going to do this again, even if it's afterwards or even if it's during the Women's Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
I always like to ask, what is the best way that people can learn more about what it is that you're doing with women's rugby and how they can be able to contribute in their own way?
Yeah, so we've got, as part of the World Rugby website, we have a webpage, www.women.rugby. If you go on there, you can join we have a monthly newsletter that comes out, which profiles amazing things that are happening globally. And we always have a call out for stories. Like I think one of the I was looking at the last story that came out of, obviously we try profiling your coaches and your leaders all the time, but there was a great story about the development camp that happened in the Caymans, where they had, a huge kind of push for 100 girls age 8 to 14 with Mercedes Foy leading it. So we're always interested in those great stories that come out of regions. So what your coaches are doing, what's happening at a community level, we've got to kind of send us your information, and then we spit it out to the world, because we're really into sharing and transferring knowledge. So if you know of something that's happening that you think would benefit from a bit of a profile push from a global perspective, but also that would benefit from other countries actually sharing in the knowledge that's going on, then you send it our way, because we love stories from everywhere.
I love it. And look, I got some that I can throw out there just off bat. So at least now I know, because I didn't know that before. So now I know.
Yeah,
so
go on that website, and it says send it to woman.rugby. I mean, it's in there. But join the current newsletter and send us your stories, and then we'll get someone to come and talk to you.
I love it. Katie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Katie, yo, I want to thank you so much. That was the absolute best. I can't wait to have you come through again. And just like any guest, yo, don't even miss who we even had before. We've had consistently great guests. Last week we had Adam Milby, the president for the Philippines Rugby Union. We had, before that, we had Warren Mullis and Preston Thompson of the American Rugby Pod. Before that, Tozan Tutsitanwe of Viral Rugby. You guys can check out some other greats. Tiffany Faye, 2017 captain for the USA Rugby team for the Rugby World Cup. We got Tiara Mack, the Miggity Mack, Rhode Island State Senator and rugby player. Koma Gandhi Fishbin, congratulations to her and her new baby, as she is on the USA Rugby Council. Georgie Coda of Rugby and Beauty. Kimani Davis of Roots and Made. We have Naya Tapper and Cheta Emba of USA Rugby, who are also now over at Madrid Sevens. Guys, we have had some amazing guests. Phil Thiel, former USA Rugby Eagle. Guys, we're just trying to get you all the information, trying to make sure you know how to tap into the opportunity, and of course want to make sure that you're connecting. All right, this social network doesn't help unless you're able to have a means of feeling like you're connected in and getting to know the people and the players in the game. So definitely check these guys out, and of course please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like us on Instagram, Grow Rugby Show. And guys, you guys are going to love this all the way through. I want to thank you again for paying attention, for watching this, for listening. And please don't forget, I hope you're happy, I hope you're healthy, and I hope you know that you're highly favored. I'll see you next week. Cheers.